Hi, everybody. It's Alex Jarett here again, and I'm here with Rob Zelinka, who's one of our new board of advisor members, and he's the chief information officer at a company called Jack Henry and Associates out of Houston. Hi, Rob.
How are you, Alex? It's good to be
I'm
with you
doing
again.
I'm doing great. So happy to have you on. First of all, on the board of advisors back in the group. Now, for those of you, Rob and I actually go a long way. We're going to talk about a little about your background, but we met when you were at this company called TTX, which, as I recall, was one of the world's largest owners of railroad cars, right? And managed it too. Is that right?
Yeah. TTX was a company that essentially managed rail cars for the other railroads that were part owners of the company.
We had a number of conversations, and what you were doing back then is you were focused on managing the maintenance, and you had all these systems that you all had built, so you would know ahead of time proactively, this is the car we got to go check, and this is. I imagine that technology's gone even farther,
Yeah.
where you got cameras and all this stuff, and you know everything. Is that right? It's probably pretty cool.
Yeah, it is really cool. In fact, one of the most prideful moments you can have is when, for example, as a parent, my
Yeah,
first job in life is to be a husband and a father.
that's nice. Yeah,
I just happen to be a CIO too.
yeah,
But there's no more rewarding or gratifying moment in my life than seeing my children driving their own successes. And in the same way, people that I've worked with years ago,
hmm
seeing them achieving levels of success. So, for instance, the team that I left behind at TTX, a lot of them are still there doing wonderful things.
yeah.
And some of them who were individual contributors under me to drive architectural or operational tasks are now leading at an executive level. It's such a gratifying and rewarding experience. When you talk about TTX, I'll tell you what was most intriguing about the
Yeah.
opportunity there. I walked into an environment that took me back decades. I walked into a data center with two humongous devices. One was a big IBM mainframe, and the
hmm
other was a big EMC storage array. And then there was actually a third device. It resembled a small shed, and it was a tape library. And there were all of these people that were walking around swapping tapes out. They were wearing blue IBM lab coats. And the CIO at the time, who was a tremendous mentor to me, took me under his wing and said, Rob, I'm moving us out of this environment, the mainframe environment, and into a Windows-based open system environment, which eventually moved to a cloud environment.
Yeah.
And here was the challenge. He had commissioned a multi-year, multi-million-dollar effort to transform their tech stack from point A to point B.
Yeah.
And the missing link for him was the infrastructure. He didn't have anyone that really knew it and knew it well. And so I came in and saw that as the challenge. And he had already told me they were already 18 months into a multi-year effort. So we were 18 months behind on the infrastructure. We had to quickly assess where we were going, and how do we get there. So of course I started with people. I brought some of the people in that I felt could help us drive the outcomes at an infrastructure layer. And within no time, we were caught up and further ahead than our application development counterparts. So we had already replaced the mainframe. We had migrated to different storage. And of course, that was all part of a multi-year journey.
Yeah.
With stops along the way.
That's fascinating, because when I look at your background, which you've done, the thing that's interesting to me about your background, a lot of folks that I interview have this as well. You have a really, really solid infrastructure background. For example, you were at Kirk. You've done a number of things. I can't go through everything in this one thing, but just some highlights. You were global head of IT, of infrastructure and operations at a firm called Kirkland Ellis. And for those of you who don't know the law firm, this is one of the biggest law firms in the world.
Yeah.
And a lot of IP, a lot of bosses. We don't need to go there because they're a law firm, but all brilliant people. Yeah. And everybody is demanding because they have their customers. And the fact that you're able to thrive in that environment is pretty amazing. But what I think is really fascinating is not only did you do that, you've also in your career you've moved into what I call more the CTO development role,
Mm-hmm.
which you don't always see people make that transition from infrastructure to development and then even transformation.
Yeah.
So what am I right about that? Because you went from Kirkland and Ellis doing that, and then you started making another journey. You kept in IT operations, but where I start to see the shift really is after TTX, you were in consulting, and then you went to a company called MFC Technologies. It looks to me like you were starting to develop, and then here at Jack Henry, tell us about where you're at now. Jack Henry and Associates, you're actually the my understanding is you're doing software and technology for financial institutions. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's spot on. So Jack Henry is a fintech. So there's essentially two types of fintechs in my
Yeah,
mind. There's
yeah,
the fintechs with the emphasis on fin, and then there's the fintechs with the emphasis on tech.
yeah,
And I would submit to you, when I joined Jack Henry a little over 5 years ago, we were a fintech with the emphasis on fin. So very conservative company.
yeah,
We were one of three major players in what I call the core banking or core credit union space.
yeah.
Um, and then since then, as we've begun to evolve as a company, we are placing more of an emphasis on tech. And all that to say, we're still a conservative company, but we're also doing things that maybe we wouldn't have before. For instance, we're embracing the cloud, the public cloud,
Hmm.
while still having to support technology that is better suited in many cases for a traditional data center, one that we manage and operate.
Hmm.
Uh, it's been a wonderful time here at Jack Henry because it aligns two of my passions. One of my passions is people, helping people, being there at a
Yeah.
moment of need, with another passion of helping them to use technology to make their daily life more efficient, more effective. And so when you can take those two
I like
passions
that.
and merge them together, there isn't a day that goes by that there's not an opportunity for my team and I to really make a difference in the lives of others. And sometimes it starts with ourselves, making our job at Jack Henry easier, but then it morphs into how do we help our customers solve the same or similar challenges to what we're facing today.
So let me get an example of this. So who would be a customer? If you said credit union.
Yeah.
So a credit union, are you providing all the back end systems to like do mortgages or manage people's bank accounts, all of the above? Or what is coming from Jack Henry?
Yeah, so we have very diverse customer base.
Uh-huh.
There are small community banks and credit unions,
Yeah,
and typically they may not have their own IT organization, and
yeah,
therefore they leverage the services of Jack Henry to provide that functionality for them. So, for instance, they might have some terminals, Windows machines that they connect to a virtual desktop infrastructure that's hosted in one of our data centers, and all of the banking operations and technology is managed for them by Jack Henry.
hmm,
Uh, then on the complete other end of the spectrum, and you'll typically find this in larger banks, regional credit unions, where they have a significant number of IT people
yeah,
and resources driving outcomes. So they might, for example, host a subset of their own infrastructure and their own application environments. And so we blend with them and augment. And then we have a lot of complementary products and services
yeah,
that we offer. So you talked about lending, for example. That's just
yeah.
one example of a complementary offering. We have contact centers. So, on the
Oh,
back of every credit card is an 800 number. And if you have a potential fraud issue, you would call that number. Well, that number might come to one of the call centers that is managed and operated by Jack Henry, for instance.
that's interesting. So, I know my son banks where he went to his alma mater, USC Credit Union, and chances are Jack Henry has software in there or even a call center. You can't say, and I don't want you to, but
Could be,
it's
but
pretty
yeah, it's not out of the realm.
it's pretty cool. So I hear what you're saying. What's interesting about what you're telling me, and you go back to your own personal mission about helping people through technology, I mean, you're actually doing that. You're helping these banks, but you're also helping the end user. And I think that's the real value added here is that I don't think a lot of people in general really realize how this huge amount of infrastructure is there just to help them go on here at their community bank and whatever. And yes, you can have this loan or you can make this payment or all the different things that we all take for granted now.
Mhm.
And you're supplying a lot of this stuff, right?
Yeah, yeah, and let me give you a great example of it,
Yeah.
Alex. So back when the pandemic first hit, and
Yeah.
look, I'll be humble and I'm I'm a prideful person, but I will tell you I
Yeah.
completely misread the pandemic
Yeah.
early days. So I felt that we would. It was around 3 years ago at this time of year.
Yeah.
The tournament was canceled. Spring training baseball was canceled. Things were being canceled around us, and I thought, well, you know what? Let's take a 2 week pause. We have 2 weeks of spring break. Some of our families were taking spring break in the
Yeah.
first week, some in the second week. Let's move everybody to full-time remote, or as many people as possible, and
Yeah.
we're going to allow the virus just to die itself out.
Yeah. So we all
Well, that
hope,
didn't
right?
happen. Okay,
Yeah.
so 2 weeks turned into a month. That turned into another month. Well, eventually it became into multiple years. But there was a point in time where it became obvious to most of us that we were going to be in this posture for the foreseeable future. And
Yes.
so that was the first time you heard of the PPP program, the Payroll Protection
Yeah.
Program, coming to the marketplace. And
Okay.
really what that was designed to do was to allow small business owners and operators to continue to pay their employees to keep their businesses viable. And as a technology partner
Yeah.
to a credit union or a bank, they needed a solution to quickly disperse those funds to people in need. One of the most prideful moments I had working at Jack Henry, and there have been many in 5 years, was when our team collectively released a product to the street in less than 72 hours.
That's amazing. And I will say, I did take one of those PPPs. We were in the event business
Yeah.
in Illinois, and for the most part. And I remember when that software, I don't know if it was yours, but somebody's software showed up
Yeah.
on a bank, and it was the banks who had that software, and
Yeah.
not everybody did. And it was, you know what? I'll just say it was a small regional bank. So I didn't know this, Rob, but I will talk offline. My bet is you helped me personally
And you
and my
know,
employees,
and
you and your team.
that's what grounds me, Alex,
Yeah.
is understanding our greater purpose in life. And the thing that makes Jack Henry so unique and in my mind so special
Yeah.
is we are so deeply connected to each other, but also the communities we serve. So you'll see a lot of outreach and things going on in these local
Mhm.
communities where the community bank is everything to that small community, and Jack
Yeah.
Henry is a part of that ecosystem. And so when we saw an opportunity not only to support our customer, but almost at the same time their customer in our community, it really was a big deal for us. And we saw a tremendous group of people do some incredible things in a short period of time, things that maybe ordinarily wouldn't have been able to be accomplished, but we did it. And it was something I was really prideful of.
That's awesome. Well, I always like to say that the CIO, CTOs, and anybody in tech, that really helped during that period were the unknown heroes. One of my jobs is trying to get the message out, even now, later, of the pandemic. I mean, look, the doctors were out there, the nurses were out there. God bless all these people and all the EMT and all those people who helped all of us. But at the same time, I think a lot of people kind of take for granted, oh yeah, I'm working from home. Really? Like
Yeah.
that was like we all expected that, and some companies were ahead. We have another company that's a member. I think probably know Tom over at
Yeah.
Christian Brothers. And they had literally the year before done all their tests and got ready for that because of the freeze. Remember the big winter freeze?
How
And
could I
that,
forget?
yeah, even in Houston, you felt
Yeah.
it,
Yeah.
and so I agree with you. And so let's go into lessons learned. And I think we'll start with that lessons learned, that you have a bigger mission than
Yeah.
just making sure there's, good
Yeah.
IT, you know. So tell us about that, and then maybe some of your other lessons learned.
Well, sure. Yes, I'm a leader of a technology group, but
Uh-huh.
I'm also a leader of a business group, a part of our company that's just as important as any other part of our company. And and that's the way I've always looked at my job. And it dated back to when I first started in my career. I worked for a software company that created software for hospitals
Mm-hmm.
and
Oh.
doctors. And then I started working in a hospital. In fact, I worked for the second largest hospital network in the state of Illinois. That was a Chicago-based hospital, and I took that job really seriously, Alex. The systems that I was responsible for directly and indirectly took care of a patient, and if they were not functioning at full capacity, the worst case scenario was that a patient care was at risk. And I just couldn't live with myself knowing that a system that I'm responsible for adversely affected the care of a patient. I
Yeah.
took it really, really seriously. And it wasn't until I left healthcare and moved into financial services in the trading realm that I realized, for better or worse, to some people, there is something more important than human life, and that something is money. So if you've ever worked in a trading environment, it's fast, it's frenzied, it's chaotic, it's exciting, it's terrifying, all in one. And so the same sense of urgency that I brought to the table on maintaining high levels of uptime and availability, and the business acumen that I needed to drive outcomes, it didn't change moving from healthcare to financial services. It just went up a notch in terms of the level of urgency because, when and at that time it was working for Citadel Investments. I will tell you, it never, in all of my career, I've never worked at a place that was so crazy. It was so
As a
busy.
trading, as a
Oh,
trading area. Yeah.
so fast. And that was really the foundation that taught me everything I needed to know about how to manage through through any operational challenge, any infrastructure challenge, because back in the day, most of our challenges were tied to infrastructure.
That's fascinating. I have two comments on that. First, go back to your original mission and the fact that you saw the connection between, I'll just use this, maybe someone needs a cord put together on their desk, which you still got to do, right?
Yeah.
And the fact that there's patient care. That's pretty amazing that you really saw that connection and felt that, and you realize that adds a lot of value. So anyone out there watching this, I would say try and make that connection to whatever the value is that your company is giving to other people, because that's what enterprises are really here for, is to serve. Back to your core lesson learned, I think that's really interesting. So that's two things you shared with us. One is make that connection. I just want to make sure I'm hearing you. Make that connection between what you're doing and who you're serving. That's number one. And number two was to be calm under the fire, I guess, is the lesson learned.
I think having poise, and you know this, I umpired professional baseball for a period of time in my life. So there's nothing more terrifying than being in front of tens of thousands of people and screwing up a call. Maybe the fact that you're on TV too could introduce more fear, uncertainty, and anxiety. And so I always tried to maintain some perspective. So that was another key element.
Yeah.
It was never quite as bad as I thought it was, but it was also never quite as good as I thought it was. And so just balancing the perspectives. And then the other piece to it is never stop learning. The world around us is continuing to evolve and change, and we have to evolve and change with it. And so, there isn't a week that goes by that I'm not investing some time. Either it's during my lunch hour or before I start working, when I'm eating my breakfast, that I'm going through some type of training, whether it's listening to a podcast, whether it's
Yeah.
taking an online course. And just recently, someone noticed that I was certified in FinOps foundations. Someone noticed that I became Google Cloud certified.
Yeah.
Or shall I say, I went through the training course. I still have to take the test.
Yeah.
And people would say, why would you do that at your level? Why not? my question is, you should do it regardless what level you're at, because the more information and experience you have, the more effective you can be to drive outcomes, especially during times of change.
That is such a great insight and another great lesson learned. In fact, I will attest to it, everybody. You look at go to Rob's landing page on our site. This is on it, but in case you're not on it, go to his landing page in the board advisors, link to his LinkedIn. And I'm just going to read just in the last few months, FinOps essentials for cloud developments, reading corporate financial statements, understanding Google fundamentals. There's 17 of them all. Because like every other month, you just love learning. And I think, every successful person I have met is like this, everybody. So this is a great tip, is to continue to learn. And the other thing is, I think what happens when you do that, Rob, you can start to put together things that maybe people didn't realize were connected, but there is a connection, right?
Yeah.
And the fact that you brought up the baseball, I remember you telling me that. I kind of had forgotten that. Who did you umpire for? I just want to hear that again, because that's a pretty cool story.
Yeah. So my last year of umpiring professional baseball was in a league that's no longer around. It was called the
Yeah.
Northern League.
Yeah.
It was you would know it from the Joliet Jackhammers, and the Schaumburg Flyers were in that
Yeah, I
league.
know. I remember the Flyers. Yeah.
And it was a lot of fun because you had college athletes that thought they were going to make it in the professional level and in organized baseball in the
Yeah.
farm system. And then you had former major leaguers that didn't, they had a career in Major League Baseball, but
Yeah.
then didn't get a contract, and so they still wanted to play. So Ron Kittle, for example, he's
Yeah.
a storied Chicago guy. He was their first manager, and then there were other former professional athletes. One of the Cubs catchers, for example, Rick Wilkins, played in that league.
That
And
must have. Oh, go ahead.
here's the interesting thing about what I learned.
Yeah.
Baseball is one of those rare sports where if you don't like the call, you can run out onto the field and state your case with the umpire in the hopes of getting him or her to overturn their call.
Yeah.
The reality is, very seldom will the call be overturned, at least back in that day. Now today, with cameras and instant play and booth reviews, it's a little different, right? But what I learned at that moment in time is to maintain calmness. That no matter how much pressure I was feeling to get the call right, to act a certain way, to respond a certain way, the reality was I knew people were watching me, but I tuned all that out and focused on what was materially important, which at that time was doing my job. And so I worked really, really hard. And it was something my father instilled in me when I was a young boy. He told me, Rob, no matter what, be the hardest worker. Show up first, go home last. And it was funny because that served me well to a period of time, but I learned something else. And I talked to my dad about it later in my life. And hard work is not enough, Alex. You got to be smart. You got to continue to learn. So while I might be the first one there, I might be the last one gone, I still have to continue to learn, because there are people that are much younger than me that want to make their blaze their trail too and make a difference, and they want my job. So when you look at baseball at the professional level, there are a finite number of spots, and there's a whole bunch of people that want the spot that you have or you covet. And so that's why I continue to learn. I continue to expand my knowledge and my horizons, and I continue to work hard, and I try to blend all that together. And then the last piece is just be a good human. Care about people. Show that you're connected to them on a human level. And that when you learn the art of managing those relationships, it will serve you well. I mean, there were times in my umpiring days where I could absolutely escalate a situation, or I could diffuse a situation.
Mm-hmm.
And while fans love to see a manager and an umpire screaming and hollering at one another, at the end of the day, you're both out there as part of a bigger purpose, a bigger calling. It's not about either one of you. It's about the collective group of people
About
that
the
are out
game.
playing the
Yeah,
game.
the people watching. It's about the
And I
fans.
took that into my professional life. So, when I'm on an incident response bridge, for instance, and it's a little chaotic and frenzied, I try to bring a sense of calm, but I also want a sense of urgency. And it's a fine line. It's a balance, so to speak.
That's really interesting. Yeah, you had a lot of good lessons in that story there, but I think one of the best ones I like is the fact that you still remember who what you're doing it for, who you're doing it for the fans and everything else, but the calmness and the education, there was a lot there. Now, you've mentioned this to me a couple times, and I want to make sure we get all the lessons learned that you wanted to share. But you said this up front and a couple times to me off, as we've talked before, and you even wrote an article called, I know you've written before, here's one, I hope you don't mind, the four foundational points of strategic IT leadership. And you say IT strategy is not independent, IT is not a lone island, IT is not subservient to others, and IT should lead. So I want to talk about two things here. The first we'll start with is people. You've mentioned every time I talk to you, you actually bring up your people
Mm-hmm.
and how much you care about them and the culture. Tell us a little about your feeling, not your feelings, your strategy and what you've learned about working with people and how important that is.
Yeah, thanks, Alex. I still believe people buy from people ultimately.
Uh,
And, you look around us. So there's this new concept called Carvana, for instance, where it looks like a Pez-shaped device and there's cars in there. And you go to a website, you buy a car. And for most of us that have ever bought a car before, it's a painful experience. But it doesn't have to be, but it tends to be. And it tends to be a very time-consuming experience. Carvana sought to remove the human component and automate it. So the price is fixed, you buy it, you know what you're getting. They'll even deliver the car to you. All the paperwork is done electronically, and it seems wonderful on the surface until something doesn't work the way it should, and you
yeah.
need a human being. And oftentimes you need a human being at odd times, after the business hours, for instance. And so for me, I want to make sure that I put people first. There's a customer on the other side that's needing something from me or my company.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to make sure that my team knows that we have a bigger purpose, a greater calling. At the same time, I want to know about them as human beings and as professionals. I talked to you a little earlier today about my first role in my life. My most important role is being a husband and a father.
Yeah.
Those are the people I work for at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what gets me motivated and energized. And I bring that energy to work. And I then want to get to know my people to the extent they'll let me know them. Some people are very open and they'll share what's going on in their lives. Others will not. It's strictly business.
Yeah.
And you have to accept and respect and understand that. But at the end of the day, it's those people that you work with that are driving outcomes. And I believe in strength in numbers. And I learned from other really exceptional leaders. I'm not the smartest guy in the world. I'll never be the smartest guy in the world. And I'm okay with that. But I surround myself with really smart people that have a lot of passion and a lot of energy for doing the right thing, for having fun, and doing whatever it takes. And those three things, by the way, aren't things I just made up. Those are things that Jack Henry is built on. And we live.
What are the three again? Say them again.
Yeah. So it's do whatever it takes,
Do whatever it takes.
do the right thing, and have fun. And invariably, here's the cool part. The older I get, the more often it happens. Invariably, you'll read an article about something and you'll say to yourself, my personal life and my professional life have intersected.
Yeah.
And here's an event that happened recently. So there was a college softball game between two teams of women, and one of the women hit a home run and it left the field, and all she has to do is round the bases. Unfortunately, she stumbles between first and second base and can no longer run the bases. Well, the rules, as they state, say that a member of her team may not help her round the bases. She must do it without the help of another teammate or a coach or somebody on her team. But what the rules don't state is that another member of the defensive team couldn't help. And so you see these women from the other team. Now, they stand nothing to gain other than a warm heart and soul for doing the right thing. They pick this woman up off the ground, and they carry her around the bases. She touches second, she touches third base, she touches home. They hand her off to the medical staff where she's treated. And of course, she left the game. But that's an illustration of the right thing to do. And I was beaming because baseball/softball is a major part of my life.
Yeah.
But so too is my company in doing the right thing. And that was an illustration of both right there. And that's just one moment in time. And so I took that article and I shared it out to my LinkedIn to say, hey, look, we're celebrating women, basically. It's Women's History Month. And there was International Women's Day was at the beginning of the month. I can't think of a better reflection of women than what we saw on that softball field. Now, I'm sure there's thousands of examples that people would say are better than that, and that was just a game. But the point is, that really struck a chord with me, and I wanted to use that to teach people that I work with what an illustration of doing the right thing looks like.
That's a great story. That is a great. I can see how your team really enjoys working with you, and I think that's a big part of what you're saying. It's people first, and I'm hearing that a lot, which you don't necessarily think you're going to hear from technology people and everything. The last thing I want to share with you that I noticed from just looking up your background and talking to you, is this article you talked about the 4 foundational points of strategic IT leadership. Is IT is not subservient to others and IT should lead. So tell us a little more about what you mean by that.
Yeah. So again, I didn't come up with this on my own. Somebody that thought highly of me and invested in me taught me this lesson, and it resonated. Yeah. And so that someone just happened to be the CIO at TTX. And I always saw myself as a provider of a service. Yeah. And so I would refer to the people at the company as my customers. So the HR team, sales team, the operations team, they were customers of a service that my team and I provided. And one day I'm in a meeting with the CIO and he pulls me aside and he says, Rob, they're not your customers. They're your coworkers. They're your colleagues. They're your peers. And I had a tough time with that, Alex, because I still wanted to be the best service provider that I could. And I had to basically understand that I can still be the best service provider I can, but that doesn't mean that I'm subservient to them. It doesn't mean I'm there to take orders. Because if you're there to take orders, then people look at you differently than if you're seated at the table. So think of it this way. You go to a wonderful steakhouse to have dinner. And it probably doesn't cross your mind that the person taking your order is going to join you and have a meal with you there, or have a drink with you. Okay, you understand that they're there to serve you and to make sure that your meal is enjoyable. Well, while I'm still there to provide stable, reliable internet connectivity, a laptop, a cell phone, a tablet to do their jobs, at the same time, we're peers, and we have to drive outcomes together. And we're better as a group of leaders driving common outcomes than if we're running independently and working in silos, which leads me to another point in that same article. There's no such thing as an IT strategy. Yes, you have a strategy for your team, but it aligns and feeds into this larger strategy for the company you work for the customers you serve. And the moment you embrace that concept that, hey, we're part of a greater purpose here. I'll use this analogy, and it's old, but it's so true. And I learned this when I worked in healthcare. So there's 2 people that are outside on a road, next to a road, and they're digging something. And you stop your car and you look at them and you say, hey, what are you 2 doing? And one of them says, I'm digging a ditch. And the other person says, I'm building a hospital. They're both doing essentially the same job, Alex, but the person that says I'm building a hospital has pride for what they're doing, has purpose for what they're doing, and an understanding of the fact that ditch is part of the foundation that's necessary to build the hospital on, and the hospital then gets built up from there. It's the same lesson that I continue to learn day after day, that my role as a technology leader is still foundational for the success of the company I work for. but I'm not subservient. I'm not there just to take their orders from my peers. Now, there are times when I do,
Yeah,
but at the end of the day, collectively, we're peers.
that's such a great lesson. The transformation that we're been through and going through even more, and we don't have time to delve too deep into AI, but the changes that are coming are going to be so significant
Mhm.
to each company in terms of how you deliver on the enterprise architecture chart, how you deliver values to your customers. Who else is better to sit at the table and help lead than someone who has taken a course every 30 days that's doing this, that understands the ramifications, and even in AI, that understands the importance of doing it responsibly?
Yeah, and let's use that example really quickly. So when I
Yeah,
started my career over 30 years ago, we staffed our operations center, network operations center, NOC, system security operations center, SOC, um, with humans, and they worked 24/7, 365 in
yeah,
shifts,
yeah,
and they performed a lot of manual tasks, and it was important work. And now all of a sudden, as we're looking at artificial intelligence, robotic process automation, machine
right.
learning, people would suggest to you that's a threat on the human, meaning you're looking to automate those so that you don't need a human. Here's where I think the rubber meets the road.
Yeah,
I'm never looking to eliminate jobs necessarily. I'm looking to create jobs. And how do I go about it? Well, it's really simple. Look for opportunities where you want human interaction, where you want a human being that can show understanding, can show empathy, can show support. Okay? Think about it this way. If you're traveling and you
yeah,
have a rental car and suddenly there's a problem with your reservation, you want a human being that can help you and understands, not a chatbot that maybe does or doesn't know. Now, maybe that chatbot can be leveraged to get you to the human being that
right.
can show understanding and empathy, but more importantly, be empowered to solve your issue. Okay. So I'm not looking to remove the human component. However, if you have tasks that are mundane tasks, in other words, you have scripted procedures that execute every day at a specific time, that's a tremendous opportunity for automation, for technology, where you don't need human interaction, where you don't need empathy or even understanding. If the task fails, another script takes place, a process continues, it escalates upwards to another person. And then what you do is you take those people that used to do that job and you train them up with new skills. And I find if you provide the foundation for them, at Jack Henry, you use LinkedIn Learning, but there's countless other tools. There's Udemy that has a portal that's wonderful. If you give people the opportunity to learn new things, most of the time they're going to seize that opportunity. And now you're able to repurpose those people into doing things that you would have brought people in from from outside the company. Never lose sight of the fact that the people that have spent years of their lives working for your company, they have tribal knowledge. They have an understanding of how things were back in the day, so to speak. Losing that, you can never replace it quickly. So if you can continue to harness that while repurposing those people to do things that need to be done because the world has shifted around them, it's all the better for everybody involved because
That,
you still have a person that cares deeply about the customer. Why? Because they are part of the heritage of your company.
that's such a great way of thinking. Such a great lesson learned. So we'll definitely share that. Now let's jump to the last segment. We only got a few more minutes here, but we've covered so much great ground. I appreciate you joining the board advisors. You said you pretty much volunteered right away and said, Alex, count me in. Let's figure this out. You know, in terms of the areas that you want to help people with, when I look at, just like if I look at your page on our site, we talk about developing leaders, enterprise resiliency, P&L management, transformational turnarounds. Like somebody comes to you and says, hey, Rob, like where are the areas where you think you can mentor people or really help people that you feel pretty strong about that you want to?
Yeah. So I enjoy mentoring. In 30 plus years, I have mentored hundreds of people,
Uh-huh.
and I still maintain contact with many of these people, decades later. At the same time, I also have mentors that I still maintain contact with. No matter how high up the ladder you get, you always need someone to talk to, someone to share ideas with, someone that you can be vulnerable with, and someone who will tell you what you need to hear versus maybe what you want to hear. What I really enjoy the most is talking with someone that's new to leadership, that have never led before.
Oh, that's
because I
interesting.
think a lot of times they come into it with no experience, maybe some preconceived ideas on what leadership is about. And I usually start with the concept of the difference between management and leadership. And I want them to understand what the difference is. And I want to share my life's work and my experience with them in the hopes that it's in some way meaningful and helps them to avoid some of the mistakes that I made early on. I mean, I remember my first leadership role, I thought, oh, this is going to be easy. I know the technology, I know everything that these folks are doing, I can do this. The challenge is I found myself wanting to be liked more than I wanted to be respected. And so I would ask people to do things and they wouldn't do them. And rather than hold them accountable, I just did the job for them. And that wasn't serving any purpose. It just introduced more hours into my workday because in addition to doing my job, I was doing someone else's job. And the person knew that they could go home at 5 and that I would finish the tasks for them. And it took someone by pulling me under their wing. And they taught me this. I have all these little lessons that I've learned and I still use them today. In fact, I shared this with one of my current directs and he and I laugh about it now, but it was really impactful for him. I said, do you think it's more important to be liked or respected? And of course, most people say, well, I want to be respected, but I also want to be liked too, because I'm a human being, I have feelings. And here's what I told him. I said, if you want to be liked, go and sell ice cream. And he kind of looked at me funny. He says, what do you mean? And I said, go and sell ice cream. Everyone loves the ice cream man. I don't know a single person that doesn't like to have ice cream on a warm summer day. Everyone will like you.
That's right.
And so now he remembered that. And here we are 5 years later, and he's really developed into an exceptional leader. And not that he wasn't an exceptional leader before, but he was fundamentally struggling with being liked and respected. He didn't know how to tell people no. And it made him really anxious. And so we worked hard on that concept. And sometimes people just don't get that concept, and that's okay. That doesn't mean they're bad leaders. It just means you have to make sure you put them in a position where they could be more effective.
That's such a great. I'm sure you got dozens of these different stories. That's the point. But in terms of new leaders and leadership, that's an area that you like to help people with. That's what I'm hearing. Now you mentioned in your chart enterprise resiliency, P&L management, transformations. Anything in those areas, or is there something else that you want to mention?
Yeah, so enterprise resiliency to me is a combination of things. It's business continuity, disaster recovery. It's being able to manage through uncertainty. So my career, for better or worse, has been predicated around impactful events. So for instance, back in the early part of 2000s, I was working at a healthcare company in a hospital.
Yeah,
and
as you mentioned,
9/11 happened.
Oh, 9/11.
And that was a profound moment. And it was at that moment in time, it was an inflection point where my business, the hospital, was looking at business continuity and disaster recovery. How would we manage through a catastrophic event? I mean, before there was a lot of drills, but we never really had a real life example up until that moment in time.
Wait, were you in Chicago? Were you in the East Coast?
No, I was I was in Chicago at the time.
Okay. But you were seeing what was happening and saying, oh my gosh, if it happens here, what are we going to do?
Exactly. And most people maybe don't remember this, but if you lived in Chicago, there was concern that the Aon Center, the Willis Tower at that time,
I remember it.
Tower, were on the threat. So that they were blocking access to those buildings. And so my hospital was a level 1 trauma center in the event something really nefarious took place. So there was an enormous amount of preparedness and readiness. And as my career continued to evolve, the next inflection point for me was the financial crisis only a few years later. So at that moment in time, there was banks becoming insolvent. There was, people were losing everything because the housing market had crashed. And that for me became an opportunity to help companies get their arms around not only their disaster recovery and business continuity plans, but how to reduce their costs. And so I came in.
Oh, there's your P&L management.
Now that brings me right into P&L management. How do I manage costs? How do I contain costs? How do I avoid costs? And so there's certain things that you will do and certain things you should not do and will not do, but it's all about managing risk. So, if you say yes to this expense, and then you're probably saying no to these other expenses.
Yes.
And so by saying no to this expense, you're saying yes to some level of risk. For example, if you don't upgrade your iPhone, probably not a big deal, right? This year. But if your iPhone is 6 years old and the next version of the iOS operating system comes out and you can't put it on your phone, now you're opening yourself up to security risks. Well, the most important device that's in your pocket right now is probably your cell phone and not your wallet, because your whole life is on your cell phone. So you want to be running the most current
version. You just
version
convinced me to go out and get a new phone. All right, so you're like Verizon's best salesman. But sorry, I couldn't help myself. You're right. Yeah. So the whole point is P&L management and understanding the whole trade-offs and expenses. So trade-offs that you have to make. The other thing that I hear you saying, we're pretty much out of time, but I want to get this out, is I hear you having figured out, and this comes back to your baseball days and your trading days, how to have those difficult conversations. Because if you want to just be liked, you kind of avoid those, and then you end up having them anyways.
Yeah.
I know this from my own experiences. You might as well just figure out how to get it out there and just resolve it, right?
Yeah, I think the first element there is manage perspective.
Yeah.
So figure out where you are, how you got there, okay? And then put yourself in the other person's shoes.
Yeah.
So, when I umpired baseball, a manager would come out, and there was one of four reasons they would come out, and we remembered it as lips. So the first reason they would come out was legitimate, the L in lips. They are concerned. You misunderstood or misinterpreted something. It's legit. Okay. The next reason they would come out is intimidate. They're there to intimidate. They've been a major league or a minor league manager for 20, 30, 40 years. You've been an umpire for 20, 30 minutes. And all of a sudden they're coming out and they're going to push your buttons. They're going to see how far they can push you and manipulate you. Which it doesn't happen much at the professional level as you might think, but it happens.
It happens, yeah, I'm sure.
It happens. P is personal. You just don't like one another. So again, in the baseball umpiring realm, Ozzie Guillen, when he managed the Chicago White Sox, he and Joe West hated one another. They knew that. They both knew it. And that's okay. It happens in life. There's personal situations. And the last is situational. This happened. It caused this effect. Now there's this steamrolling effect. You as an umpire have to figure out quickly, within plus or minus a few seconds, why are they out here to yell at me? Why are they out there to have a conversation with me? I use that same approach in the workplace. Now, we're civil in a workplace. No one's yelling at one another necessarily, but you have to put yourself in the other person's shoes. Why are they coming to me with energy around this? What is it? Something I missed? Is it something I misunderstood? Did I do something untoward in their mind? And not afraid to have a real conversation, a human conversation.
Yeah.
Here's what I've learned. If you screw something up, own it. Don't try to, pass it over, throw it under the table. People know and appreciate someone that will own their failures.
Yeah.
And just tell them, I screwed up. It's on me. This is what I'm doing to fix it so that it doesn't happen again. Thanks for bringing it to my attention. I think that goes a long way.
But you've also learned how to help people do the same thing. And I'm listening to you and say it in a way that it's not personal. It's just these are the decisions that we have to make to do good for our customers. You know,
Yeah,
that's what it's about. And you tie it all together. So I really like that. So any last comments you want to make? Because this has been so many great, first of all, great history. I love the baseball, how you intertwine that. I love how you tie in the hospital experience and knowing that your core mission, and not everybody in technology gets that. So if you just get that one thing out of here, which is figure out that this company that you're working for, who you're really helping, and realize that you have a part in that value chain, I think that helps people right there. Just that one thing. And then also the fact that you really care about your people and you go out of your way to work with them, get them to know them as individuals and create a great culture, I think is great. And the whole thing about learning is great. So many great lessons learned. I think somebody to be able to spend any time with you will be a benefit to them. So any last thing that you want to add, Rob, before I sign off?
yeah, just really one last thing, Alex.
Yeah.
In as much as I want to help people, I want them to help me. So it's always a two-way street for me. So if we end up being connected, in as much as I'm there to teach you, I'm there to learn from you too.
Yeah.
And so don't be shy. Don't think that because I have 20 or 30 years experience, I know everything there is about a certain topic. I certainly don't. And there isn't a day that goes by that I'm not learning from someone enough. In fact, the best teachers in my family are my youngest children, who are teaching me
Yeah.
things that maybe I am terrified about, but they have no fear. And it's amazing how fast they learn. So just, go about it with an open mind, an open heart, an open soul, and you're gonna find how enriching it is to grow from the experience.
I don't think I can wrap it up any better than that. So we're going to stick with that and say, Rob, thanks so much for your time and sharing some of the I would say hard-earned wisdom, the lifelong wisdom that you gave with our audience. And thanks for being on the board of advisors. We're really grateful for you being a member and being part of that to help other people in our community. So
Well,
Rob, thanks for
my
this.
honor. Yeah, my honor. Thanks.